What does that word guilty give you when you heard that? What did that give you?
Well, there was a bunch of us that got together last night, and we were talking and celebrating, clearly celebrating after yesterday. And we just kind of felt like for 3 years we've been slowly collecting cinder blocks and dragging them along behind us, and we didn't know that they were there. And then yesterday, those ropes, those tethers were cut, and we were able, like, just the biggest burden that we didn't know was there was lifted. It was amazing.
A lot of people think what was amazing is the reaction, the sheer joy, if that's the right word. When you came out too, the cheers, the applause, that was really remarkable to see. But I would imagine the emotions are much more complicated than what we saw.
Yeah, way more complicated. Like, it was a very joyful moment. We were happy, definitely happy. This part's over. Do you know where I'm not going on Monday? I'm not going to court. Great feeling.
It was a mission for you to go there every single day. So now what? What do you do now on Monday morning?
I'm going to go back to being boring. I like boring. I'm going to see if I can find my carrots in the garden. There's so many weeds back there. I'm going to try and find them, and that's going to be maybe my mission for Monday.
I remember seeing you in court, and the rage, the emotion was palpable. It was vibrating off of you, but it's so different today. How do you get to this point? That's what people who've been watching you throughout this are trying to wrap their heads around. How do you get to this point where you can laugh and be the way you have been in the last few days? How do you get here?
It's a lot that brings you to this point. We have a lot of really good family and a really, really strong network of friends. We have faith. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 years doing grief work. I've gone, grief counseling, and really trying to bring myself back into a better place than where I was that May, that June, that July, and spend a lot of time to ensure that I can still be the best mom, even through everything that's happened, even through going through this court process, preparing me for the court process, preparing myself for having to testify, and just learning how to do life again on my own, but as a mom.
You mentioned your faith. You are a woman in a family of very, very deep faith. But through all of this, through what you heard, through what you saw, the randomness of what happened to your husband, how do you hang on to that faith?
God didn't do it. It's not his fault. And there is, clearly there's evil in the world. There's bad people. That's what my daughter and I talk about. There's bad people.
You've reconciled that randomness of it, the evil of it.
Mm-hmm. I guess for me, we didn't do anything to justify, to deserve anything. I know Tim is a good person, and that works. I don't know, maybe that's what helps me, is I know that Tim is a good person. I know where he is now, and that's a comfort.
You mentioned you were with friends and celebrating last night and talking about what the verdicts meant to you. Do you talk to Tim as well? Did you talk to him last night?
Yeah, I did, actually. I don't know. Do I admit that sometimes I randomly walk through the house talking out loud? Probably people might think I'm a little bit crazy because I walk through the house just talking out loud, the odd little comment here or there, and you should see this one, or did you see what she said? Did you hear what she said? Yeah, we have those conversations.
And what was it like? Can you tell me what it was like last night?
It was almost like a high five.
Yeah.
It's kind of like high five in heaven, being like, yeah, we got this one.
You said at the outset, I remember at one of the press conferences, that this will never be over for you guys. Do you still feel that way, even with the verdicts?
This part of the court process is over. But as I said yesterday, this doesn't bring Tim back. Like, it closes this chapter. We're able to move forward from this point and, rebuild our lives. We've been working on it for 3 years, but you sort of get suspended up until a certain point because there was so much, up until the trial started, there was a lot we didn't know. There was a lot that I didn't know. So I sort of ended up in a kind of suspended state for a while where I can only do my grief work up to a certain point because there's too much I don't know. So through the trial, it's been really hard, but it's answered a lot of questions for me.
Sitting in court day after day to hear specifically what happened, how did you sit there through all of that?
I think just sheer determination of I'm not walking out. I'm going to listen to it all. I'm going to be here for him, and later on one day when my child has questions, I'm going to have the answers. My biggest thing is I want her to be able to come to mommy and mommy have the answers for her. I don't want her to feel she has to go somewhere else to find those answers. And it is my job as her mom. That is nobody else's responsibility. It is my responsibility as her mom to give her all those answers and to know those answers. So I could not shy away from what was coming in that courtroom. I knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be ugly. I didn't know how bad or what it was going to be, but I wasn't going to let that deter me from finding out what happened to Tim that night.
Now that you know specifically what happened, how does it move you along in that healing process?
It's kind of, do we really know what happened that night? I don't think so. We know what happened once they got to the farm and everything after that. But what really happened in that truck that night, we don't know.
Do you still want that answered?
I don't know anymore.
When you saw Mark Smith, when you heard what he was saying, what did you make of his version of events?
That was a really well coached, planned, however you want to. It just seemed very tidy to the evidence that had already been presented in court. I don't know. I'm not him. I go with the belief that the Crown story is probably the closest version of events. Even that, I don't know. I wasn't there. There was two very different versions that came out of that truck that night, both complete opposites. I think the Crown's is probably the closest to the truth of what actually happened that night.
The jury certainly believed that.
However, whatever they believed and however they came to their decisions, I'm just glad they did.
You've done a remarkable job of keeping your daughter shielded from all the attention. What kinds of things does she ask you at this young age?
We've had some pretty heavy conversations. We've talked about heaven and what death is and the permanency of that. That was, kind of where we started. She has asked me, is God done with Daddy yet? So is he going to send him back? And, he's not coming back. Once you go to heaven, you don't come back. That took some time for her to wrap her head around. The bad man hurt Daddy so bad he couldn't get better. So we have a lot of talks about bad men. For a long time, she was worried they were going to come back while Mommy was sleeping. So for 2 years, she slept beside me. In the beginning, that was comforting. And then towards the end, I was like, okay, sweetheart, you know what? You have a great bedroom upstairs. It's very princessed out. You need to go back up there. But it's been a struggle dealing with not just single parenting after a death, but single parenting after your spouse has been murdered it's a bit of a tough one. But as long as she keeps asking questions, I'm going to keep answering. And they're hard, and that's life.
You've turned Father's Day into a conduit for answering those kinds of questions, as I understand it.
In the beginning, sort of, but now it's just all the time. We go see him. And when we go see him, there's definite questions. She does tend to climb all over the headstone and dances and runs around, and she plays in a cemetery. It's weird. Well, at least I thought it was really weird in the beginning. Now it's kind of like, it's our normal.
What do you see for your future, for her future, your future together?
I cannot change what's happened. Nothing I do or say is going to change what's happened. So I have to figure out how to accept it and deal with it. And learn to live with it. And live well. Because there's living and there's living well. And I choose to live well. I choose to live happy.